And we're still going live. And we are almost live, and we are live.
Great. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining the Environment Subcommittee. Um, just wanted to sort of give explain to everyone the order we're going to take things up and a little bit about process. So the first bill we're going to consider is House Bill 344, my bill concerning the MES board. If the subcommittee is good with the revised amendments, we can consider passing that. Next one will be HB 452, Delegate Guidance Bill about outdoor lighting. We discussed it last week. There had been a question that required some follow-up with DNR. We have an amendment. Subcommittee is good with that. We can consider passing that. Next one will be HB 747, Delegate Guidance Bill on septics. Some amendments were sent out earlier, but there was later this afternoon, there was an update to the amendments, and honestly, I didn't have a chance to consider them. So we're just going to discuss what the bill
Hey,
current form does, and we'll consider amendments at our next meeting. And then the last bill, which I realize probably a lot of advocates are here for, is HB 49, the BEPS bill. We're First thing I want to emphasize, we're not passing anything tonight. The purpose of the review we'll do tonight is to discuss the MDE amendments, which MDE has proposed at this point. They're not the only ones which, may be considered or may be added. We will be doing that at our next meeting. We'll be, considering other amendments. And, usually what I've said with respect to advocates is that only, we'll only allow an advocate to speak if you're called on. But I know that a lot of the advocates who are here because of the BEPS bill. So when we get to HB 49, and after we've had a chance to review uh, the amendments, take questions from the subcommittee members, I will then say, if anyone wants to make a comment, about the MD amendments, raise your hand using the raise hand function, and then we'll give each of you 2 minutes. All right, because again, I know a lot of people want to weigh in, but in the interest of trying to keep this organized and so we don't go until midnight, I'm going to say 2 minutes for anyone who wants to speak. And then again, we're going to take up the bill, again at our next meeting. We're probably going to have to schedule a meeting earlier than our regularly scheduled time of next Wednesday evening. We'll figure that out, to be determined. Okay. Any questions from the subcommittee before we start?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
so 2 minutes, how many, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We won't make it for the real properties meeting if we give each of the advocates 2 minutes.
Well, I'm hoping that not everyone will, who's an advocate who's here will want to speak to that, but I know that a decent number will. So I figure, again, rather than sticking to our protocol about saying you can only speak if you're called upon, in this case, I know a fair number of people who are here because of the BEPS bill and will have, some comments. And so
Can we make it like 1 minute? Because we already heard testimony on the bill, so. I mean, it's up to you, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I just, in the interest of time.
Okay. If someone wants to keep it shorter than 2 minutes, they
Don't
get
ask questions.
extra points for that. So, okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Ruth, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we just emphasize that, everybody had a chance to testify on the bill and ask that they really keep their comments to the amendment?
Yes,
Thank you.
that's a very good point. Yeah, only feedback about the MDE amendments that we're presenting tonight should be the subject of any comments. If, don't want an advocate to say, well, in addition to what's been proposed, I think you should add X, Y, or Z. No, that's not tonight. So, good point. Anything else? All right, well, let's begin with HB 344. Kristen, could you tell us where things stand in the proposed amendment?
Sure. House Bill 344 is altering the composition of the Board of Directors of the Maryland Environmental Service. by replacing the state treasurer with the secretary of planning or the secretary's designee. And we have amendments that would also add 2 legislative members who would serve on the board as non-voting members.
Okay, so this is a slightly revised version of the amendment that had been proposed last week. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Actually, I can't remember what we put out.
Oh, anything.
Did we
Yeah.
bring it up? I don't have it written down. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Delgado.
Thank you,
Got
Mr.
him.
Chair. This unmuting and muting is
Sure.
difficult, but I see Jeff Tozzi's here. My concern is adding the delegate and the senator in non-voting capacity. I don't know what the encouragement is for them to participate at that point in time.
Yeah, so if I can speak to that,
Yes.
so yeah, I think a similar thing is being done with the Chesapeake Bay Trust right now on their board, but adding them as members of the board enables those particular individuals to participate fully in the meeting. The MES board meetings right now, generally, we will reserve time for public comment at the end of the meeting. This would enable those individuals who are directly accountable to the legislature to participate fully in the MES board meetings, but they don't have to, obviously as non-voting members, they don't contribute to the votes that take place to approve contracts, but they can ask questions just like any other board member. And the executive director also reports or sits on the board as a non-voting member. So in that capacity, he does the same thing. I think it's a good compromise. I think the chair came up with this idea, and I think it's a good thing. And we encourage more participation by as many people as possible in our board meetings.
Thank you, Jeff.
Got it, buddy.
Mr. Chairman, I move the amendments.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Bill as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I think I heard a second. So all those in favor of the bill as amended say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Bill passes as amended. House Bill 452. Kristen, if you could talk about the amendment.
Sure. Do you want me to bring it up on the screen?
Sure, that'd be
Okay.
great.
I was trying to get ahead of it, but I didn't. Can you see it okay?
Can you enlarge it, please?
Of course, yeah. That's nice.
Maybe close that tool ribbon, Kristen, on the left. Yeah, there you go.
All right.
Yeah, that's good.
So the Department of Natural Resources didn't weigh in on the bill. However, they did provide the fiscal note did indicate that there could be costs to DNR with new purchasing requirements. And so I reached out to DNR, and the concern really was that depending on when this guidance was issued and which projects it would apply to, they were concerned that it could impact projects that have already completed its design phase, and it could potentially require the department to have a costly redesign. So this just adds language that the guidance would have prospective application, and it wouldn't impact any project that any purchase of outdoor lighting fixtures for projects that have already completed its design phase.
Okay,
And the department was
Delgado.
comfortable with that language.
Mr. Chair, I'd move the amendment.
Second.
All right. Let's see, who else? Let's see, Delgado. Oh, Al, I see that you had raised your hand. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, so we saw the amendment when Margie sent around in the packet. I'm speaking on behalf of the Sierra Club. We don't think that it's needed. The guidelines in the bill are exactly that. They're guidelines. They don't have any force of law, or they don't require any agency to do anything differently. But with this amendment, it's holding up the entire bill. The second part of the bill, which really strengthens and broadens the 2011 law, which DNR has been living with for 15 years successfully in all the other state agencies. And it does not raise their costs because the fixtures that are compliant with the bill are not more costly. And there is a waiver provision. So anytime DNR or any other agency wanted to deviate from what the bill says, they could simply request a waiver. So our position is that the amendment is not needed and is as an alternative, you could simply just change the effective date for that second part of the bill to October 1, 2026. If DNR wants more time to complete some of their projects that are in their pipeline. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Al. All right. Well, let me circle back to Delgado. You made the motion for the amendment. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. You still good with your motion?
Yes.
And there was a second. I forget.
That
who
was me, and
seconded.
I'm still good.
Still good with it. Okay. All right. Al, I appreciate your comments, but we have motion and a second on the amendment. So all those in favor of the amendment say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Delegate Ruth, you have a question?
Actually, I was going to discuss before we voted on the amendment, but that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. All right. The bill as amended. Is there a motion?
So
I
moved.
move the bill as amended.
Great. Okay. Moved and seconded. All those in favor of the bill as amended say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, bill passes as amended. Thank you. All right, moving on to House Bill 747. Good number. And
Good
so again,
airplane.
with apologies to the sponsor, we're not going to consider, and any advocates who might be on the call, we're not going to be considering amendments tonight. We'll do that at the next meeting. So, Kristen, if you could bring this bill up and explain to us what it does in its current form.
Did you want the bill on the text brought up or just discuss it?
Oh, just discussing is fine.
Okay, sure. So the bill is establishing requirements for inspections and pumping services for on-site wastewater systems for both rental properties and at the time of sale. There's language in the bill that would indicate that if these if you hold on, that's not the bill. So for purpose of meeting the requirements of the bill, a property transfer inspection or pumping service performed would be valid for 3 years. So for rental properties, this is supposed to be conducted between tenants, or if you've conducted an inspection or pumping service within that 3-year period, you wouldn't have to do another one if you had a more frequent, turnover of your tenants.
Okay. Any questions about the bill as introduced? Okay. Well, we'll hold it for next week when we do have amendments, and we'll certainly send them out in advance of the meeting so that we can take them up. Let's see, Delegate Foley.
Yeah,
have a question?
thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm confused about the amendments on this bill.
Well,
I got something that something that is an official amendment and something that's an unofficial amendment.
yeah, no, that's a good point, Delegate Foley, because there were a few iterations of the amendments that were being sent around today. That's the reason why I'm saying we're just going to wait until next week to discuss the amendments, because
Okay, but can we that's great, but can you tell me which amendment, which one? Are we going to be doing the official amendment or the unofficial amendment?
I honestly can't say, Delegate Foley, at this point. I'm not 100% sure. So
Updated
one reason
materials will
why,
be
but
sent.
maybe Kristen can answer.
So the official one, I think, is something that will be addressed because that's dealing with the current board of on-site wastewater that they want to push back the implementation by 2 years because it's taken a little bit of time to set up the board. So that's making changes to current law. The potential ones, sorry for the confusion, but the sponsor had initially submitted them to me because she wanted to make the subcommittee aware of some of the discussions that were going on and that, you know, kind of benefit from where people already were, the stakeholders were in those discussions. However, it seems like the stakeholders have further fleshed out those potential amendments, and they're cleaned up a bit, and will be in a better format for discussion for next week.
Okay, great. Thank you. That clears that up. Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions? All right, thank you. All right, House Bill 49, BEPS. So Kristen sent out the MDE amendments, which hopefully everyone, you know, subcommittee members as well as advocates, agency representatives have seen. So again, those are the amendments that we're going to discuss tonight and get feedback on. So the process will be, Kristen, I'll first ask you to review the amendments, then I'll ask MDE to weigh in, and also MDE, if, you know, Alex or Chris, whoever will be, you know, talking on behalf of MDE, provide a little bit of context to the subcommittee about, you know, what BEPS does, you know, focusing on EUI and direct emissions so that, you know, everyone's up to speed as to sort of the main components of BEPS as issued, you know, the regulations issued by MDE that this would amend. And then we'll take subcommittee questions, and then that's where, you know, we'll open it up to comment to brief commentary from folks on the call, other folks on the call. All right. So with that, Kristen, could you begin?
Sure. And would you like the reprint to be brought up on the screen?
Sure, sure.
All right, sorry. I'm gonna move this. Is it zoomed too much or is this okay?
You're good.
Yeah.
So we're starting on page 2 of the bill, and this is section 2-1602C of the environment article, which requires BEPS to include special considerations for certain characteristics and categories of buildings. And the amendment language is adding language to ensure that special consideration would be given to the use of on-site renewable energy by covered buildings. There's been some discussion that that language might need to be further fleshed out, and MDE has sent more specific language that specifically requires that the regulations give credit to the generation of on-site renewable energy at covered buildings toward their energy use intensity targets.
Right. So the key thing, I mean, for this item, as Kristen said, the key thing is number 5. That's, you know, that point about allowing for consideration of on-site renewables by covered buildings. That'll most likely be fleshed out by MDE, and that's something that we'll take up next week. But for now, you know, number 5 is, you know, is a proposed MDE amendment. Okay.
Okay to move on?
Sure.
Okay. So moving to page 3 of the bill. Currently, the regulations include an alternative compliance pathway that allows an owner of a covered building to pay a fee for the greenhouse gas emissions in excess of emissions targets. And the bill adds language to also provide an alternative compliance pathway that allows the owner of a covered building to pay a fee for excess energy use. The amendment specifies the payment rate for that alternative compliance at 5 cents per 1,000 British thermal units for energy use over target levels. And so this is a language that follows line 9 on page 3, following Roman 6.
Right, and specifically referencing EUI, energy use intensity targets. Um, okay, well, why don't we take subcommittee questions as they come up? So Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So are these payments in lieu of compliance, basically? So are they forever, or is there, I didn't read through the amendment. Is there a time limit? Do you get to do that forever? Do you ever have to comply if you pay the fees?
Yeah,
Kristen?
why don't we go through all the amendments and then have MDE speak, and then we can answer. That's a good question. I'll defer to MDE to answer. Okay. Delegate Otto.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How are you calculating this on whatever energy they're using in that building, be it electric or natural gas or heating oil, or
Yeah.
how is that determined? I know what a BTU is. I understand that, but I want to know the formula, how you're calculating this tax.
Okay. Well, we'll put that on hold for a couple of minutes as well. We'll have MDE answer that. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Kristen, why don't you continue?
Okay, so Roman 7 is establishing the one-time waiver. It's providing an option for this one-time waiver from paying emissions or energy use alternative compliance pathway fees for up to 5 years. And then in item 1, that's detailing the process for submitting a waiver request. The waivers must be submitted at least 1 year before the requested waiver would take effect, and include a plan that's prepared by an engineering contractor. There's requirements for that engineering contractor to complete training that follow later in these amendments. The plan must detail the dates that specific projects will be completed and the EUI and emission savings that will result from the projects. And item 2 requires that the plan demonstrate how the building will comply with final targets before 2040 with minimal reliance on alternative compliance payments. Item 3 requires certification that projects will be completed by the dates identified in the plan. And in the event the projects are not completed by those dates, then the alternative compliance fees will need to be paid. And then item 4 would require that a request for a waiver include a fee to cover the cost of reviewing the plan.
Okay.
Okay.
Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what we have in so many words is we're going to, and I've been speaking to Mako about this today for full disclosure, and I think that the chairman has seen some stuff from Mako later this afternoon. It appears 2 pieces. Looking at this directly, fees, one time, blah, blah, blah. It's very open-ended, and there's no real definition as to what the amount will be, other than we'll get there somehow, some way, and trust me, that per my interpretation. But more importantly, I'm going to go back to when the secretary gave the bill the other day, and no one wants to embarrass the secretary when she's there. But when I listened to the governor, he said to us, we have 3 main areas of focus where we want to get ahead. And they were in aerospace, they were in health, and they were in quantum. The secretary said this is going to be very, very expensive at the end of the day. This, to me, says, yes, it's going to be very, very expensive. So pragmatically looking at this from a business point of view, remember, as a business owner, I did okay, sold the company. But I'm asking everyone here to sit there and ask the question, if you're going to talk about this issue, and we're talking about the amount of money you're going to have to ask an investor or a company to come in and deal with, and you talk about ROI, and you have an open-ended answer, in 5 years we can do this, and in 1 year we can do this, and there's a nickel on this or a dime on that. where are we trying to find the economic driver to bring businesses to Maryland that will focus on the governor's three areas, aerospace, health, and quantum? And I looked up today, what is the average size of a quantum AI facility? 100,000 square feet.
Delegate, I'm sorry. I'm
Am I
sorry
missing
to
something,
interrupt.
sir?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Delegate, but I think your argument is more about the bill in its final form. Right now, I'm just looking for particular questions about the MDE amendments. I appreciate your thoughts and your concerns, but let's save that for final debate on the bill in the subcommittee, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right. Any questions about this language in Roman numeral 7? Delegate Otto.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Is there, any way that they would recover these, taxes? If they have to provide the energy for the building with a rental generator or something because we've electrified it and the grid goes down and they don't have supply? We have a blackout, a brownout, or this, that, and the other. Is
Yeah,
there
that's
protections for the businesses in that?
okay. Yeah, let's save that for MDE as well. Okay. Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So let me see if I understand this, and maybe Kristen can help. So if you can't, there's an alternative pathway, according to this language, that you can pay a fee in lieu of making the change, making the conversion. And then later on in number 7, which I'm trying to find here, what did I do with number 7? Oh, yeah. Number 7 says, allow the owner of a covered building to request a one-time waiver from paying the alternative compliance pathway fee. So what we're saying, am I right on this? What we're saying is you can pay a fee in lieu of making the changes, and then you can get a waiver on paying the fee.
Yeah.
In cases where you're going to meet the 2040 target, but not necessarily in the interim way that is required. So it allows some flexibility to say, yeah, we're going to get there, but not necessarily in the pathway that's been established in the regs. That's the
That's right.
one-time waiver.
Right.
Okay. So, okay. I mean, when we get to talking about the bill, that seems like a huge loophole, but
Well, if they don't reach their targets, they are supposed to be on the hook for the avoided fees.
okay.
The whole thing is to be like, yeah, is assuring that they're going to get there. So therefore they can avoid paying the alternative compliance fee. But in item 3, that it says that, they're certifying in this plan that's being submitted that the projects will be completed by the dates detailed in the plan, or that the exemptive alternative compliance pathway fees will be paid in the event the projects are not completed by those dates. So the idea is to have compliance by 2040, but just allowing flexibility.
Okay, but then in number 7, it says they can apply for a waiver on all of that.
No, that is number 7. That's what the waiver is. The waiver would include this plan that you're certifying, you have projects that are going to get you to the 2040 targets. And if you don't get there, those avoided fees would have to be paid.
Okay, now I understand. Thank you. Okay. So you're actually in the process of doing it. You're just not going to get it done in time.
For this waiver, yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Delegate Ruth.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to follow up on Delegate Foley's question to make sure I understand. So an alternative compliance fee would be either if you can't get there, like it's a really old building and it's just not possible to get there, or if you're going to get there, but you just, you say you need 5 years to get there, and then you don't get there when you say you're going to. So it'd be one of those two scenarios you would pay the fee. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's right. And the waiver is, as Kristen said, under number 7 is if you can hit the final targets in 2040, but you might not meet the interim targets, and you explain why, and but you're able to hit the 2040 target.
Right, but then if you don't hit the 2040 target, you pay the fee.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay, Kristen, want to get to Roman numeral 8?
Yes, and so this is another waiver provision, and this is a waiver that could be applied for economic and feasibility, which is relating to energy or reduction measures that would be infeasible because they wouldn't achieve a simple payback within a certain amount of time. And so this is Roman 8. And similar to the previous waiver, it's detailing the process to request this waiver. And for an economic and feasibility waiver, the building owner would have to submit to MDE at least 1 year before the requested waiver would take effect, an engineering study that details the economic feasibility or infeasibility of energy or emission reduction measures that would be needed to achieve the EUI and direct greenhouse gas emission reduction targets.
Right. Another example of what might be deemed to be economic and feasibility is you have to install the systems that you need to get to the goals under BEPS, that you just need more physical space than you have for the system. So that could be another reason why you could apply for this waiver, saying that it's not economically feasible. Okay, why don't we continue?
And the building owner would be paying a fee for to cover the cost of reviewing the engineering study. The bill requires, so this is on line 11. I think I'm going to page 4. My page numbers are, I don't know if this is probably still page 3, but it's going to be unnumbered if you have a hard copy. So in line 1, the bill requires BEPS to include an annual reporting fee, and the amendments just specify that fee is $100 per covered building. And that would be to cover the department's administrative costs related to BEPS, the BEPS program.
Sounds like another tax in the bill.
Well, it's a fee to cover, administrative costs of the department. So, okay, well, we continue.
Okay. And so then after line 16.
Hold a second, Chris.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Delegate Morgan, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have any idea how many of these covered buildings there are by county?
Yes, I think MDE has a breakdown. And again, I'm sorry to keep on saying let's wait for MDE, but I know they have a total number, and I believe they have a sort of county by county breakdown.
Thank
you. Okay, Kristen, why don't you go ahead?
In line 16, the department's amendments are adding language to excuse a building from making both the EUI and emissions compliance payments, alternative compliance payments, if both are due. So that the department would only collect the higher of the two fees if they're paying fees for both. After line 19, new paragraph 6, that is detailing the training. The department must offer training to help engineering contractors understand the regulations adopted under the bill, or adopted the BEPS regulations, and including requirements for alternative compliance plans and engineering studies. And MDE would publish a list of these engineering contractors that have completed the training.
Okay, you want to talk about number 7?
Sure. Paragraph 7, language is being added to allow buildings to comply with a county or city BEPS program instead of the statewide BEPS program if the local program is at least as stringent as the statewide program.
Yeah, so this is to deal with, I mean, currently the only jurisdiction that has their own BEPS program is Montgomery County, but so to deal with the issue of dual compliance with Montgomery County versus the state in the event that any other jurisdiction implements their own BEPS program.
And new paragraph 8 adds language that will allow a local government to adopt standards for buildings that are not covered buildings under the statewide program. There's categorical exemptions that are in the regs, so they're just saying that the local government's program could adopt for those buildings. I'm gonna skip through the next because the bill is double drafted because it's the section that the language is drafted to is subject to termination. So for drafting purposes, have to double draft the bill. So this might be hard to find. So on the first unnumbered page after bill page 5, there is a definition being provided for economically infeasible. For right now, that would mean for a cooperative housing corporation or condominium, the expected payback period for an energy or emission reduction measure is more than 10 years. There's been talk to potentially making that all applied to all of multifamily housing. And then for other buildings, the expected payback period would be more than 25 years.
Okay, any questions? Yeah, Delgado Foley. Delgado Foley?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had a wardrobe malfunction. So let me understand this. Does this mean that they can get a 25-year, like they could basically opt out for 25 years?
No.
I don't understand
Doug.
what this
Okay.
means.
And
Yeah.
again, rather than my making an effort to explain, since we're almost through these,
Okay.
this is
All
a
right.
list of things that
Okay.
we'll ask MDE to explain.
Okay.
No, I understand.
Yeah, it's just
It's
confusing.
confusing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
you
thanks.
know,
You want me to go to the last piece then?
sure.
So the bill directs the alternative compliance payments to the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, and the amendments would add language that would direct those funds to be used to provide grants or loans to help owners of covered buildings comply with BEPS. And then up to 10% of those payments could be used for administrating the grant and loans under this section.
Okay. And I guess that's it, right? It's a lot, but that's that's it. All right. So now I've been repeatedly saying thank you, Kristen. Repeatedly saying let's defer some questions to MDE. Before I ask MDE to jump in, Delgado, did you have a question?
Well, I'll wait till after MDE.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I know we have a number of folks from MDE. Thank you, Alex, Chris, and Jeremy, if there might be others. So at this point, I want you to add just very quickly context to what the bill what BEPS is getting at. So for folks who haven't been living in BEPS world, might have forgotten what this is all about in terms of the energy reduction concepts, and then answer the questions that subcommittee members brought up and add anything else you'd like to. So MDE, take it away, please.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Kristen, for the overview. Chris Hoagland, I'm the Director of the Air and Radiation Administration at MDE. So in 2022, the Climate Solutions Now Act created the Building Energy Performance Standards. These are regulations for large buildings, 35,000 square feet or larger, with some exceptions. Under the BEPS framework in Climate Solutions Now, buildings will be pursuing dual reduction targets. First, one, to reduce their on-site greenhouse gas emissions according to thresholds set in the law. Second, pursuing energy use intensity targets. This is effectively a measure of energy efficiency. So becoming more energy efficient while also decarbonizing. The department has promulgated regulations for the greenhouse gas side. We have not yet promulgated energy use intensity standards. That's pending analysis based on 2025 data that the General Assembly has requested that we can begin performing next year. What this bill is intended to do is take that existing program and add flexibility and reduce costs. The provisions that Kristen outlined, first, complete the cost caps. Alternative compliance payments in this type of regulation are a cost cap by providing owners the option of either investing in their buildings to meet the standards or making this fixed payment. Any investments that cost more than the fixed payment are no longer worth considering. So that fixed payment sets a cap on the costs. So the addition of the first alternative compliance payment for energy use intensity would complement an existing alternative compliance payment that the original legislation authorized on the greenhouse gas side. Then there are the waivers to establish conditions where buildings can exceed the standards, which would ordinarily mean they would be making alternative compliance payments for whatever they're doing in excess of the standards, but they could waive those. The first one is simply timeline flexibility. Any building could request 5 years, a 5-year extension. If they identify what needs to be done, then all alternative compliance payments are waived for 5 years. In the 5 years leading up to the date at which they say they will complete the projects. The second one, the economic and feasibility one, is meant to take projects that do not make sense economically, they're just too expensive for whatever reason, and say we should just not do them. Establish a process by which a building could identify the projects that are more expensive than we should fund, and identify how much above the standard their emissions or their energy use would be due to not doing those projects. And then the department would waive the fees, alternative compliance payments associated with not doing those projects. That would last 5 years and could be renewed every 5 years. The idea being that technologies change, costs change. So every 5 years, a building could renew that waiver. And then there are other elements in the legislation meant to improve the program in other ways, making sure that MDE can staff up people so that we're answering phones, answering questions, helping buildings comply, ensuring that if buildings do make alternative compliance payments because they're exceeding the standards, that revenue goes back towards helping buildings meet the standards. And then there's the provision for county consistency so that buildings aren't simultaneously complying with different county or city and state standards. So I'd be happy to start going through some of the questions that were asked. I see a hand. I'll defer to you, Mr. Chair, on how to manage that part. I think you're muted, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, Delegate Foley.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just, so based on what you said, Chris, so is there a scenario where a building could continue to renew waivers to the point where they never comply?
Yes, the economic and feasibility waiver could be indefinitely renewed every 5 years, as long as it remains economically infeasible to perform certain projects that would bring them in compliance with the standard.
Okay, so they would be, emitting greenhouse gases. You said they complement each other, and they would not be energy efficient, and they could theoretically do that, forever.
In theory, yes. We tried to establish a process by which that would be done in cases where the projects are not worth investing in because they would meet the economic and feasibility definitions. But yes, the idea is that could continue.
Okay. And then my second question, if I could, Mr. Chair, when you talk about the money going to grants and loans to help with compliance, which is a good idea. Could you talk a little bit more? I don't know. That may be another legislation. I'm just not aware of what. Can you just describe briefly what that program is, what those loans are, who gets them, I don't know if you fleshed that out yet. If you have, I'd like to know about that.
I think there are existing funding programs administered by MEA that covered buildings are eligible to apply for to perform energy efficiency and decarbonization projects. In this bill, it would simply say that any funding from this particular source would go to covered buildings that are covered by the regulation to help them meet the standards in the regulation.
Yeah, I guess I'd be interested in like who gets that, because it's not an unlimited pot of money, I wouldn't assume. So there would have to be some prioritization, right?
Yes, I think we could assume that these would be competitive grants administered by the Maryland Energy Administration.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's see, Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following on Delegate Foley's question, Chris, give me a couple examples of those things that could per se be perpetually excused.
Sure. We know that there are certain, thank you for the question, Delegate. We know that there are certain buildings that have some needs where it's really hard to decarbonize. The chair mentioned there may be buildings where just the physical orientation means there isn't space for a different type of equipment. So in order to make space, there would need to be work on the foundation or some sort of expansion of the building that would just be prohibitively expensive. That could occur in many different building types. We've heard from some building owners that they have some unique need where the technology to decarbonize simply isn't there yet, or it is, but it's just really expensive. So then we would say, listen, we don't want any building to be in the position where they'd have to do some project that simply just does not make sense, even when we account for the funding that's available to them, and the alternative compliance payments that they would save. It's just not worth anybody putting any building in a situation where they face just astronomical costs for any particular project that could arise, given we have a large number of buildings covered by this and a very large diversity of the situations that the buildings are in.
So it doesn't matter if it could be residential, common ownership, or manufacturing.
Sure. Manufacturing buildings are exempt from the program, so they wouldn't face that's for that specific building category. But yes, it could be in a condo building where it's just whatever project, it just doesn't pencil out, it's too expensive. Then they could exercise this waiver option.
Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like, one thing is the process. I want to hear from the stakeholders in this as well. And I think you offered that opportunity earlier. But the process for offering an amendment to this, what should I do in that case?
Yeah, you mean if you
to
want
the amendments office or talk to Kristen or?
Sure, talk to Kristen, and we can consider that at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking forward to hear the stakeholders.
Sure. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, I assume even with all with the waivers and alternative compliance payments, we think that this will still significantly achieve the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Is that?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we believe so. By targeting the projects that are not cost effective, we could stand to reduce compliance costs really significantly without giving up significant amounts of environmental benefit, because again, these are the projects we've targeted that just are not really worth pursuing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, all good questions. Thank you. Chris, do you want to run through the questions that subcommittee members had?
Yes, happy to. So there was the question if alternative compliance payments can be made forever. Yes, in fact, they can. There was the other question about how BTUs are calculated, what energy use types. It is all energy use types, all electricity used, all natural gas used, et cetera. That is covered by the energy use intensity standards. As for how the 5-cent number we proposed came from, we looked at other programs in the country that have that similar mechanism. The most direct example was Denver. Denver's version of this alternative compliance payment was 10 cents. So we suggested 5 cents. 5 cents. We ran the numbers on that. That would save a couple $2 billion in compliance costs. And like I just mentioned, not forego significant amounts of environmental benefit. It is also slightly higher than the average cost of the projects that we estimated, which is about 3.5 cents. in terms of the fees for the waivers, which are not defined in the legislation, those would be voluntary in that they would only be if a building chooses to submit a waiver, and the department would set those at what covers our cost of reviewing the information supplied so that we can approve the waivers. In terms of backup generation, many buildings have backup generators. We see the economic and feasibility waiver as an opportunity for buildings that really need backup generators to get the emissions and energy use associated with those backup generators exempted through the waiver process if there are not cost-effective means of providing backup power from zero carbon backup sources.
Delegate Ruth, did you have a question?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, sure. Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This might not be this might be kind of a dumb question, but I'm thinking about like carbon cap and trade arrangements. This feels a little bit like that. These waivers and these waivers, they're not transferable, right? So like I can't if I own a bunch of buildings, I can't say I'm gonna pay for for these buildings over here. I'm just going to pay more so I don't have to comply over here. Am I right on that? They're not transferable between buildings.
Good question. That is correct. They are not transferable. There's no trading in this program. It is an individual building level assessment. I believe that there were, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Chris.
There was a question about the number of covered buildings by county. We're happy to provide that. We have an estimate right now of the total number of buildings, and we do have that breakdown by county. So we'd be happy to provide that.
Yeah, if you could provide that, maybe provide it to Kristen, who can distribute it. And Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr.
You
Chair.
trying to
I
add
just
something
wanted
on
to
that?
mention that I just emailed it over to Kristen, and so if she could share her screen, we could see the county breakdown.
Yeah, while we defer on that, appreciate that, Jeremy, but just in the interest of moving ahead with the discussion, and Kristen, if you could send it out after the meeting to everyone. Okay, Chris, was there any other question?
There was a question whether the economic and feasibility exemption applied for 25 years. I think we perhaps discussed that it applies for 5 years and that it's renewed every 5 years, but there's a 25-year time period over which the math determining whether a measure would be economically and feasibility would be calculated. And I'd be happy to follow up more. That's a confusing point, I know, but the waiver for that would last 5 years, but could be renewed every 5 years.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, Chris, could you just explain a little bit about, the 10-year period, the simple payback calculation, for buildings covered by the 10-year period versus 25 years?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to. So the way we're proposing to define economically infeasible is that a specific measure at a building, for example, replacing its boiler, would be costed out. It has an upfront cost, and then it has potentially savings, annual savings in terms of energy use. So we're suggesting that a measure like that would be evaluated over either a 10-year or a 25-year period, where the upfront cost would be considered, any incentives available, programs available to defray that upfront cost would be considered, and then annually, any savings from energy would be considered, and also savings from avoided alternative compliance payments, and that would factor into simple payback calculation for that measure. If that simple payback period takes longer than 25 years, that measure would be considered economically infeasible and eligible for the waiver. What we propose is that there would be a shorter time period, meaning it would be easier to demonstrate economic infeasibility for condos and co-ops, given the unique ownership model for those types of buildings and the challenges that come from that unique ownership model.
Okay, thank you. And Chris, anything else that you want to add before I ask for feedback from advocates?
I appreciate the committee's consideration of the bill and these amendments and everyone's time tonight.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the good discussion. So at this point, I want to ask any advocate who would like to, I said up to 2 minutes, you'll get points with the subcommittee if you spend less than 2 minutes, but if you could put in the chat a raise hand function and speak now or forever hold your peace in terms of wanting to raise your hand and speak, okay? And okay, so I see Mike Powell, Jamie DeMarco, Brian Anlou, John Fiastro, Josh Tolkien, and Chris Parts. Okay, last call for anyone who wants to say anything. And again, this is, let's see, Ben Roush. Okay. So again, it's just commentary, not for purpose of asking anyone, anyone from MDE, any questions, but your feedback on the proposed MDE amendments. Okay, so with that, I will start Mike Powell.
Thank you, Delegate. You asked about our reaction to the amendments, because as you know, we didn't see the written amendments until the day before. We had concept discussions with MDE. I think that the feelings among all of my clients, that includes the home builders, some of the individual building owners, are disappointment that the amendments don't come nearly close enough to give enough flexibility. Our calculations, and understand the calculations are difficult because MD has not yet proposed what the EUI targets will be, are that some large buildings may go as much as $1 million a year in alternative compliance fees. A strip shopping center, by our numbers, a small strip shopping center would be $60,000 a year. Big shopping center would be $1 million under the number in the amendments. And I won't go through each of the amendments, but I'll give you one example, the economic infeasibility. It's not simply economic infeasibility where you compare the cost of doing the improvement versus the energy savings. They've added in that you also have to show that you also save money because you're avoiding a tax that is being added by this. So if you are a large hospital and you've got $1 million a year tax being added by this, you got to show that saving that $1 million in the taxes still is not enough to make it economically unfeasible. So I think it basically removes the flexibility that we see. And there are other examples, but I want to stay within the 2 minutes.
Okay.
So I have to say that we are disappointed.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And for the subcommittee, did want to say that after everyone, all the advocates have had a chance to make comments, then we'll open up to questions that you might want to ask of them. Okay, Jamie DeMarco.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Jamie DeMarco on behalf of the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. I want to say that we really appreciate the work MDE did, meeting with stakeholders and developing this policy. We think the proposed amendments do an excellent job of maintaining the strength and benefits of the program while also providing needed flexibility to building owners. No building will be required, under this amendment, be required to do anything that doesn't pay for itself. Doesn't pay for itself, economically infeasible, you don't have to do it. I'll make a plug. I sat down with the nation's leading expert on building energy performance standards, Cliff Majurzik, and spoke for an hour about these amendments and recorded it as part of a podcast, Maryland Energy Talk. If you search for Maryland Energy Talk wherever you get your podcasts, you can find a detailed description, or an hour-long conversation going over exactly these policies, and encourage everyone to go in and listen to that. Just want to applaud MDE again and say that this is a good compromise moving forward. We would oppose any further weakening of building energy performance standards, which are current law, and this is just granting additional flexibility. We think this is the right amount of flexibility, but no more than this.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Brian?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Brian Anlou with the Apartment and Office Building Association. Notwithstanding Michael's comments, I'll just say I think there are a few things to like about the MDE amendments. I think we have some tweaks that I wouldn't describe as weakening them. I think it would just allow multifamily buildings in particular, but generally all buildings, the ability to be able to comply with the regulations and make them more workable and reduce some of those costs. And I just want to set the context. I've said this a few times, but what we're talking about is the impact, particularly on the multifamily side of AOBA, on housing affordability. And so we're happy to share those tweaks that we're asking for in writing. I'll make sure that committee staff has those and those are circulated, and we'll be following up with meetings. But thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Josh?
Good afternoon or evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak, Chair Stein. This is Josh Tolkien on behalf of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club. We, the Sierra Club, were strong supporters of the Climate Solutions Now Act, as was a majority of the General Assembly, and I believe many of the people on this call. While we were surprised, we have adjusted to the budget required adjustments made to the legislation in recent years. And we believe that the amendments and legislation put forth here produce significant opportunities for flexibility for owners. We commend MDE for being very open in their conversations and discussions about how to find the balance in this policy between all of the health benefits, environmental benefits, and energy benefits that come along with the building energy performance standards, and some of the questions and concerns brought forward by building owners. I will agree with Jamie DeMarco that we can live with and support the amendments that are being proposed here, but they have pushed up to our comfort level on the changes that we would be able to, and our members would be comfortable with without losing many of the climate, health, and environmental benefits. So we do support these amendments, and we urge the committee to move forward with them and be cautious and about any further adjustment to the program without giving it the chance to actually function and operate. And thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. John?
Mr. Chair, thank you for your time this evening, and thank you for the committee members' time as well. My name is John Fiastro. I'm here on behalf of Vicinity Energy. Vicinity Energy is the district energy provider within Baltimore City's Central Business District. And in reviewing the MDE amendments, and we were having conversations with MDE and ongoing conversations, we just do want to make sure that when there is a conversation about economic infeasibility, that it's not just physical changes to the building, but also the potential to connect to a district energy system. Connecting to a district energy system does allay concerns about extra square footage that may be needed in order to accommodate new heating apparatuses, and would answer that concern. And so, I don't want to take any more of the committee's time. We are having ongoing conversations, and we think that there's a way to have a good solution for everyone. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Am I on now? Okay.
Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Thanks all for the opportunity to speak here. Just wanted to make 2 points. One is just a reminder that the energy use intensity is not just the equipment replacement. That's looking at the building. You can do building envelope replacement or envelope enhancements that are going to reduce your demand for energy on projects. That's often a part of HUD finance, affordable housing and other types of projects. So that's something that reduces your need. And then secondly is just that the equipment will likely be replaced within the time frame of when the improvements need to happen anyway. So it's not requiring equipment that would not be in a cycle of replacement. So I think it's just keeping those things in mind as you're taking a look at the requirements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ben?
Hey there. So I'm Ben Rausch. I'm a professional engineer, and I am the chair of the Maryland Green Building Council, who is in charge of implementing the rules for all of these, for all BEPs on state buildings. Sorry, my son just came up. So I like that this added flexibility is here. That will be useful in the state building realm. I also think that that you can renew it is great. I think the avoided compliance path fees are really important to include in your total payback, because you already have that in BEPS. BEPS already has a payment for both carbon emissions and a statutory. It's not set unless you adopt these amendments, but it's set to it's set to the statutory limit that MDE can charge. So it could be rather a lot more than this minor fee on a BTU basis. So great flexibility, great add. And the only change I would make is I'd want to see all costing on a life cycle basis. So you get utility rate increase. So you get the maintenance, the averted maintenance cost of a new system for both, particularly the 25-year, but the 10-year cycle as well. So that you're capturing the total cost of ownership when considering the change out. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks everyone for your feedback. Any questions from the subcommittee of the advocates who've spoken? Okay, all right. Well, very good. Well, thank you. That wraps up our meeting for tonight. A little bit longer than an hour, but not too bad. So again, I want to emphasize that for this bill, obviously we're HB 49, appreciate the MDE amendments, and it's possible that at our next subcommittee meeting, there may be other amendments that we consider to be determined. And speaking of the next subcommittee meeting, we'll almost definitely need to meet before Wednesday, so may do a poll about possible times, but stay tuned for that. And with that, any final comments for the good of the order from any subcommittee member?
Move to adjourn.
Okay. All right, I'll second that. So, all right. Thank you, everyone.